This is Will Montgomery, former Washington Redskins center.
Yo, what's good, folks? This is Trey Johnson, the headbanger, yo, and you're listening to Mess Hall with Rally Captain and Tailgate Ted. Word.
What's going on, Rally? How you doing, man?
Hey, brother, I got a little bit of a sore throat, but I'm going to work through this because our listeners depend upon us to give them the good stuff. Let's get it.
I hear you, man, and I appreciate you jumping on. It was great to see you over the weekend at the draft party. You, a bunch of listeners, and thousands of Washington fans, man. That was just such a damn good time out there.
Let me tell you something. If any of our listeners, which I don't believe that our listeners are, but if any of our listeners are naysayers about what's going to take place in 2023, as far as fandomship is concerned, then go ahead and unplug your phone or your listening device or whatever you're listening to right now, because it's evident that FedEx Field, as JP Finley says, it's going to bump, bro.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you, you can stop listening, but let it keep playing for analytics, just so, we can kind of keep the listens up. But man, let me tell you, I was not excited about the draft party because it's at National Harbor. Pain in the ass to get out to, right? How much can they possibly do out at the harbor? There's not a ton of room out there. I got there at 10:30, and there was already a line of fans at the beginning of the pier starting to go up towards one of the restaurants over there. So I just stood in line because everyone else was standing in line. No idea what I was standing in line for. I just stood in line and thinking maybe this is a line for VIP because I had VIP passes because of the Washington Gold plan I'm on, not just because I'm Tailgate Ted.
Nice.
So next thing you know, I see a bunch of Commanders employees that work there, and I'm chatting with them, jumping out of line. No, turns out VIP line was all the way upstairs. So I had to get out of line to go up there and go grab that. And that's where I saw you and the missus, Omar, the Commandalorians, just so many people, man. And it was surreal. So they were giving out beers, like little beer tickets, nothing crazy. I think you get 2 beers. You couldn't buy any or anything like that.
Right.
And we were hanging out in a little VIP joint up top, and I saw the video you took. And next thing I know, this was maybe 15 minutes later, the line went from the beginning of the pier all the way up the staircase. And for those that are local, like Bond 45 is a restaurant at the top of the staircase, up to Bond 45 and down around the corner. I mean, it was just unreal how many fans showed up to that thing, considering how much a pain in the ass it is to get out there and how early they got there, man. I was shocked, and burgundy and gold represented that day, and I am damn proud of all of them, man.
My hat goes off to the organization, Joey, Guest Services, National Harbor, for allowing us to be able to put it there. I think one of the guys I spoke to, his name was Mike. He actually was telling me that they have a flag day and he wants to hoist my flag up. And I said, Mike, unfortunately, not this flag, brother. I'll get you a flag that you can hoist up and you can, but he's like, come on, Cap, I got to get this one. And I couldn't do it. I just can't part ways with my flag, but I'll give him a workaround, but not that one. And my hat goes off, man, because it just was an awesome event. And like you, at first I was saying, why aren't they having this at the stadium? But it seems as though every other year we switch it up, because one year was at the stadium, one year was at the Anthem, then another time it was someplace
COVID
else.
got in the way.
Yeah, COVID got in the way.
Yeah.
And so, like you, and then I parked in the parking garage, and I just started seeing burgundy and gold walking toward the event. And I said, well, I got to be going in the right direction, because there was just so many people walking in that direction. And like you said, once I got there, I saw you, Omar, the Commandalorians. It was just a great vibe. And man, Ted, bro, I get emotional about this because
Yeah, man.
for a long period of time, this is all we've ever asked for. And here's the thing: we haven't even eclipsed to what our potential is. I mean, I know the glory days, but we're far from removed from that. But just to see everyone coming out and representing the way that they did, oh gosh, man, let this sale finally go through. That's another thing. People, there's still a tad bit of people who are just waiting for the I's to be dotted and the T's to be crossed. Once that happens, it's going to be a full run on. You may not even be able to get tickets.
I don't think people are going to be able to get tickets for the home opener if they don't try and sign up now. I mean, we all come together at FedEx, right? And yes, we get flooded, but it was different, man. And I was in New Orleans when the sale news broke out with like the Buy Dan IPA and all this other stuff with Josh Harris and everything else. So I missed out on that when the fan was broadcasting out there, and I was salty.
Excuse me.
And I'm walking around New Orleans and I'm listening to it on the air while it's happening. But the energy from everybody there, nobody argued about a rebrand. Nobody argued about a team name. We were debating if we probably should have taken Forbes or a different corner or a different lineman, but everybody was smiling. And we've told stories on the pod before about how you're wearing gear and I'm wearing gear and we're walking around town and we got people just yelling at us for supporting the team. But that wasn't happening on Saturday. And it was like a weight was lifted off of the shoulders of the fan base, and we all got to get out there. And there was nothing even to celebrate yet. You know, the party hasn't even begun. The sale ain't done yet. But talking to a bunch of people off the record, this thing's happening, bro. And the employees I spoke to who are going to remain nameless, they are as excited as we are. And I've got some clips of Jason Wright. He did an interview with Last Call on CNBC talking about ticket sales and things like that. And man, I thought people were going to complain because that line to get autographs from players. So Sam Howell was out there, Jahan Dotson, John Allen. You had Ken Harvey. You had, let's see here, Brian Mitchell, Doc Walker, like a bunch of legends, Gary Clark, Fred Smoot. The line was nonstop, but nobody seemed to care because we were all just together. And that's what I envision it's going to be like week one or
they
week
may have
two.
to take some. They may have to take some of those tarps off. They have to, bro.
I think the seats are gone. I don't know if there's actually anything there.
No kidding.
I mean, I know they did remove a bunch of seats because I got some of my house, but I don't know if they tarped over them or if they actually took the seats out. So
that's going to be a question we got to ask. Are seats underneath those tarps?
Because I think it was the official new seat capacity was like 65,000 last year at FedEx Field. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I've got 4 season tickets to my name. And I already told my little brother and his wife, you guys come back up from where you are. And the 2 seats beside me are yours, because it's going to be a historic day to have our first game at home without Dan. And I can't wait for it to happen. And if it's even like a half of the energy that we had this past Saturday, we're in for a heck of a season, man.
Yeah. I can't wait, bro. I really can't wait. And shout goes out to the young fans. I took some pictures with some young fans that are just ready for action as well. I took pictures with older fans as well, but you know, I'm more so tended to take pictures with the up and coming fans because they don't know what glory days look like or feel. And so it's good to be able to start them off now to get them to kind of understand, hey, you guys are on the ground level of this thing and we're on the verge to become great. And I'm not saying that just because I'm rally captain and these tailgate Ted. This is what I actually feel. If you were there Saturday, you felt what I'm saying, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not that I'm trying to bloviate or be better than anything. No, that was just a feeling. You know how Beyonce has her beehive. Well, Commanders had the Commander hive, if you will, because everyone was up on a high.
We really were, man. And I'm right there with you, just taking pictures of people and just hanging out and talking and just shooting the yes. And I ended up hanging out with Wale later on. So
Nice.
he rolled into VIP and just came out of nowhere and just chatting with him about draft picks. It's just the people are coming back and they're coming out the woodwork. And I just saw a ton of people that I haven't seen at functions in a long time. And I criticize the team. I do. Our listeners know I do. But they did right by us this past Saturday. And that was them on a budget. That was them not having new ownership in place, allowing them to truly go all out. So once we actually have this deal done, imagine what it's going to be like and the atmosphere we're going to get for people that actually care about the team, haven't just phoned it in, and that are going to want to rebuild the relationship with this fan base. That's what has me excited. And like I said earlier, Jason Wright was on Last Call. I don't know the guy. I don't watch CNBC, but Jason's on it, so you got to watch it. This is actually what Jason had to say about, everyone being excited about the ownership change.
If a sale does go through, okay, and you don't need to knock your former boss, Dan Snyder, or still boss, I guess. Yeah. What would a sale mean? What does Josh Harris and his team, who, by the way, own the 76ers and a bunch of other stuff, what are they going to change?
Yeah, and it's certainly not a knock to Dan and Tanya, who have allowed us to completely rebuild the organization the last 2 years under crisis, and it needed rebuilding. But we are going to be able to absorb a resurgence of this fan base. I mean, this is a historic franchise with a 90-year history, the people that love this team. And we've already seen some of that business momentum come back. When the sale was just announced, the process was announced last November, we sold what we would normally sell in a full season in annual suites. We made that in a week after we announced the sale.
You made in a week what you would normally make in an annual season on pre-sales for the big money suites.
That's right.
So literally, big money fans are coming out of the woodwork anticipating a sale.
Yeah, there's anticipation of this franchise returning to what it once was. And people are willing to jump back into business with us, whether that's sponsors, suite holders, and others. And we've now built an organization that can absorb that momentum.
And it's not just big money. It's our money too. And everyone's ready to go. The only snafu was the credit card machine wasn't working at the Fanatics booth. So they could only take cash. So there were people that were, trying to give money at that point, but they just couldn't do it. But people are ready. And speaking of ready, we actually have Pete Medhurst joining us to talk about the draft. So we're going to circle back on this topic, but I'd like to welcome Pete Medhurst to the show. Pete, one of the hardest working guys out there. You can find him on Twitter at Pete Medhurst, Medhurst. Pete does play-by-play for the Naval Academy. Every once in a while, he's on the Nationals radio network, Rosecroft Raceway, WBAL radio. And Pete, I think you're also doing lacrosse.
I am. As a matter of fact, I got a lacrosse game coming up in about an hour and a half in the Patriot League quarterfinals. So, it's nice to have a busy week still.
No, it's great to have you on, Pete. Thank you, man. And I enjoyed hearing you back on 980 this weekend with some draft coverage for the Commanders. And really, that's what Rally and I wanted to kind of bend your ear about.
Sure, let's do it.
So from a deficiency perspective and an overall needs, going corner with the first two picks, going Forbes and going Laquan. I mean, I was shocked when they took Forbes, but after spending, a lot of time with Fred over the weekend at the draft party, he's got me as a believer. And talking to Doc Walker and B when we were out at National Harbor, I'm excited to see this kid play, but not addressing offensive line or more specifically tackle with that second pick. What were your thoughts on that?
Teddy, they appear to have a lot more confidence in the depth that they acquired. Wiley, obviously, maybe Cosme doesn't bump into guard as of yet. Maybe he competes at tackle. Maybe Lucas is still going to be someone that competes at tackle. They like their people clearly a lot more than I think some other people do. Now, the analytics were not as mean to the Washington offensive line overall as I think the eye test was at times. I mean, when we watched the Giants, full-fledged pass rush coming at Taylor Heinicke, like they knew what the snap count was and what the play was going to be. Same thing with Micah Parsons and that Dallas pass rush, Philadelphia's pass rush. So, maybe they think things are correctable. Guys like Chris Paul, likely slides in to compete at left guard now for Washington. So they clearly like their people that they have in terms of depth, the acquisition of Gates as well. The only question I have with Gates is you're talking about an off-injured player, and those guys tend to, have you on pins and needles as the season goes along. So could they have gone tackle? Was there a quality player there? Yes, but they must like their people better. And I'll say this, Forbes and Martin are good players. There's no doubt about that. They're going to be good players. We'll see at whose expense, by the way, in the lineup. I think Martin is probably a insurance policy in case Cam Curl sets the price too high. So perhaps that's one of the reasons behind their thinking with him with that second pick, just in case the bidding gets too high with Cam Curl.
Hey, Pete, want to thank you for being on the show. It's Rally Captain. And, we hear a lot of analytics about this person said we have a B grade. Other person says we have a C minus, C plus. We're all over the place. What's your actual take? What grade do you actually give us?
Look, I think with the players, I look at it this way. Whenever I evaluate, I ask, A, can this person play in the NFL? That's the first and foremost thing. Can that person play in the league? And are these guys starters in the league? Now, they still think Daniels can play some tackle. I'm more convinced he's a guard. Stromberg, I think, could be the starting center day one. I think he could beat out Gates. So he's potential starting player. And clearly the first two guys have the potential to be starters in the league. So when I look at that, I love the kid from Louisiana in the last round. I love Chris Rodriguez, such a great college player, very productive guy. So I think they drafted players that will all play in the National Football League. So from that standpoint, remember, you can't really tell what the draft is going to be for at least 2 or 3 years when you see how these guys pan out for your organization. Did they draft NFL-capable football players in every round? Yes, they did. Do you give them an A for that? Did they draft, very productive guys? Chris Rodriguez, look, you want to know why Will Levis got picked in the second round? Because Chris Rodriguez was the offense at Kentucky. I think he's a steal in the 6th round for Washington. You're not going to meet a kid that plays football harder than that guy. So I think from that standpoint, KJ Henry was an absolute theft, I think, in the 5th round. You could have taken him on the second day with no problem. Nobody would have batted an eye. So did they take NFL caliber football players? Gentlemen, they did. So from that standpoint, I think you give them an A minus, B plus, at least going into it, because I think 4 or 5 of those guys have ability to eventually be starters in the National Football League.
A minus, B plus. That's
Wow.
It's pretty high, Pete. That's pretty high. And
well, I mean, Ted, it's definitely not a C. If you say that those guys, if you think that draft is C level, then you don't know how to evaluate individual players. The question ultimately becomes, we don't really know. Jim Nagy at the Senior Bowl has a great tweet every year. Every draft should be an I because we don't know. It's incomplete because we don't know how those guys are going to play with their respective teams. I mean, I think Seattle and Indianapolis had filthy good drafts. Can I give them 5 A's, 6 A's? I think they crushed it. Now, 3 years from now, we may look back on this and go, oh, that guy wasn't that good, and that guy didn't pan out, or this guy had a character issue. And then it certainly downgrades, that level of a draft. But did they take guys that I believe can be productive NFL football players? You bet.
And I do agree with you. I think it's a little foolish to try and grade draft classes, at least until year 3. But this is what, we're all starving and hungry for football. And this is just what we do. And this is year 4 of Ron Rivera drafting. And I feel that he goes with high floor players that can contribute now, not so much high ceiling. And the Rodriguez pick.
Well, and Teddy, to that point, I think the fact that he chose Forbes over Gonzalez is maybe a switch in some of that mindset, because Forbes is a guy that still has ceiling. I think Gonzalez is who he is. Gonzalez is going to be a good player for New England. There's no doubt about that. But I think he is what he is. I don't believe there's more ceiling to Gonzalez's play. And I think that's one of the reasons why, he dropped this far. People didn't see him as a guy that's going to be, and he might be an all-pro corner. But I think people don't see him that way. And then when the run started on offensive linemen, everybody said, well, wait a minute. And edge rushers, let's go in that direction. And that's why Gonzalez and Forbes and those guys got all the way down where they did. I just think Witherspoon at 5 to Seattle, there's no doubt he was the best defensive back in the entire class. I mean, last year, opposing passers had a 25 passing rating against the guy. So there's no doubt he was the best player in the draft. Seattle, Pete Carroll, he loves great secondary play. So from that standpoint, Witherspoon was definitely going to go high. But the reason why Gonzalez, it's not like Washington was the only team that passed on him. I mean, he went 17. There are a lot of people thought he'd go 6 or 7. So I think everybody had the same evaluation. Really good player, but he is what he is. So the Jalen Carters of the world and players like that went higher because you just know those guys have the potential to be dominant, exciting, game-breaking players on the defensive side of the ball.
Agreed. And I was just shocked from my side watching things that we know what the defense is and the potential there, but using those first 2 picks on back-to-back corner and not addressing offensive line until later on in the 3rd when you get Stromberg and then you get Daniels, I was just not understanding why they decided to do that. And yes, you're mentioning earlier how they have more faith in their line, but all the analysts out there, pretty much consensus of needs were cornerback, offensive line, quarterback, because people don't understand that Sam Howell is who they're hitching their wagon to, and tight end. I mean, how shocked were you that they didn't bother addressing tight end in this draft or quarterback either?
The question at tight end is, they know the medicals on Logan Thomas better than anybody. Do they feel he's got some more in the tank, or do they think one of the guys behind him has that ability? I mean, remember, last year, all we heard about in training camp was Cole Turner is going to be the second coming of almost like Jordan Reed. All we saw him doing late in the season was blocking. I was dumbfounded by the use of Cole Turner late in the year, but always I think Armani Rogers played very well in the short glimpses that we saw of him making the switch from quarterback to the tight end spot. Again, it comes back to they value their players maybe a little more highly than we think. I mean, if you think right now, Ted, that the offensive line from right to left is Wiley, Cosme, Stromberg, Paul, and Leno, then I think there's your answer on why they didn't go offensive line in the first 2 rounds. So last year, none of us had them picking Jahan Dotson at 16. Jahan played, though, like the number 16 player in the draft. So they got that type of production evaluated in the low 30s to low 40s, like that. But Jahan Dotson proved to be that player. Forbes and Martin will have to prove to be those players. By the way, think about how good that Illinois secondary was. I think they had 4 guys go in the first 2.5 rounds. So, I mean, just a sensational secondary. Guy that's well coached out there. I mean, Bielema's staff does a great job. That's why you saw Illinois taking such a big jump the last couple of years out there in the Big Ten. So you're getting a guy that's coming in that's got, I think, still a lot more ceiling. Forbes has a lot more ceiling. And I think it's similar along the lines to the pick of Dotson last year. And look, Martin Mayhew even came out and said, Ted, and I think this says something about him, to be honest, and I'm not sure how good it is. I like Martin a lot, but talking about hesitating to pull the trigger. I mean, look, Rally Captain, you go to like every away game. You pull the trigger no matter what on the tickets to go to an away game. There's no indecisiveness on your part. Howie Roseman right now has no indecisiveness whatsoever in making moves for Philadelphia. And he has set them up to be very good for the next 3 to 4 years at minimum. They're going to be an elite ball club, barring significant injuries. So, from that standpoint, that's the difficulty. If Martin Mayhew is, talking about, having trouble pulling the trigger, you're going to be, what you are. You're going to be mediocre in a division where everybody is good. Everybody. You got to fight fire with fire right now in the NFC East because everybody is playing football at a pretty high level. And look, I thought the Giants had a fantastic first 2 rounds of the draft as well. So, I mean, look, everybody in the division got better. The 2 first picks for Dallas, Mays and Shoemaker, both going to be, terrific contributors, I think, for the Cowboys. So everybody got better. So now it's going to be up to whether Ron and this staff can coach these guys, and Sam Howell obviously can step up, because it's up to Sam now, I think, for this team to take that next step. Because as I said, I laid out what they think is the starting offensive line probably for this coming season. So now it's up to the quarterback and a lot of other players to step up and see if they can get it done here now. Because, I mean, you could be a really good team. You can play well, and you could be 8-9 in the NFC East, just losing a couple of close games. And that could be the difference between competing for a playoff spot and not competing for a playoff spot.
Well, Pete, you mentioned as far as me pulling the trigger on away games, you're right. I don't hesitate when it comes to that. So I'm wondering if the whole ownership aspect of things possibly is making them second guess themselves when it comes to that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, again, and this, I will say this on Ron and the entire organization's behalf. When you're going through a sale the way they are right now, everybody's walking on eggshells. You don't know when the Josh Harris group comes in with the samurai swords and starts chopping people off. Maybe they don't. Maybe if you have a solid season, they say, hey, continuity maybe helps this team. Maybe we keep these people in place. They're building something going in a positive direction. But, is 9-8 or 8-9 going to make a new ownership group go, hey, we got the right people doing this, and we're going to be great going forward. We're going to give them more money. We're going to give them more resources to this group, to these decision makers. And that's why I think this season has to be good. And if you're afraid to pull the trigger, like Martin Mayhew was talking about, that again, do you believe the rumor they had something going with the Raiders for 7 if Anthony Richardson was around, as we saw today? I don't know. I don't necessarily know if I believe that. I mean, anybody can come out and make anything up about, they had conversations with this team going or that team going. But if something is presented to you to go get a good football player, then, sometimes you got to be willing to take that chance. And if you're going to be a great executive, the great executives know when that moment is. Maybe we'll look back on it. Martin Mayhew will go, whew, man, glad we didn't make that deal because, that player that we were interested in didn't turn out to be a good player. But how much time will he have and will they have to decide, that type of fate, depending on when these new owners take over?
Yeah, there's the writings on the wall that new ownership is coming. And I feel that these guys they share a little bit too much. And Mayhew saying he wishes he was more aggressive and had a chance. Is this, Mike Jones coming out and talking on Kevin Sheehan's show about potentially trading up? Is that them trying to say, hey, we thought about it? Hey, we were potentially going to do it. But I really think it's all going to depend on, can they make the playoffs this year? And in my mind, they did not improve in the draft compared to our counterparts in the NFC East. And it's foolish for not ESPN. It's foolish for NFL.com to do power rankings at this time of year, but they did a post-draft power ranking. And believe it or not, the Commanders fell 1 spot from 29th to 30th based upon who we took. And, it's all ridiculous at this point. And, I just really want to thank you, Pete, for coming on and humoring us and talking to us about the draft.
Well, and you know what, Ted, here's the thing. You can, yes, if you're evaluating going, wow, a man, if I tell you the name Jackson Smith and Jigba or Anthony Richardson or Jalen Carter, yeah, you get jacked up about that because those are high profile, elite guys, elite programs. And we get all fired up about it, quarterback, all that other stuff. But how do you win? You win by building your roster. And when you build your roster with people, the caliber of Emmanuel Forbes, if he works out, then you look like geniuses when this is all over with. If Martin ends up being, a great member of the secondary, he's likely slot guy to start out with. But, I saw a report today that talked about maybe the Ravens being interested in trading for Kendall Fuller. So if that happens, then who knows what the secondary, looks like coming up. So if these guys turn out to be good football players and impactful football players, and I think that's the word, impactful. Just because you're not picked in the first round doesn't mean you can't be impactful on your team. Look at Cam Curl. Cam Curl played on a terrible team at Arkansas, was playing both corner and safety. Nobody had any idea he was going to work out at safety as well as he has here in Washington. And that's a 7th round guy. So, this is all a crapshoot. It's a roll of the dice. And just because you didn't pick a corner or a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, or a Heisman Trophy running back or wide receiver, doesn't mean your draft can't be impactful. We just don't know how impactful it's going to be until we actually see these guys play a football game. And that's where you get into these guys that either look at just analytics, but even when you look at the analytics, Forbes, gigantic jump in passer rating against him from last year to this year. As I tell people all the time, Joe Miller and I talked about this on our It's College Football podcast in our first round evaluation the other night. You go look at Emmanuel Forbes' 2021 game against Georgia, and you want to beat Ron Rivera senseless for making this pick. You go back and watch his tape this year, and you go, oh, that's how much the guy improved. His opposing passer rating went from 90 to 44. So that's a guy that I think is on the uptick. And when you watch the two different variances in the film, now you see what they saw with him taking such a huge jump from 21 to 22. And I don't think he was coached great. So I think he's got more growing to do being coached at the pro level. You go, as I said, you go look at Illinois secondary. Those guys are fantastic. Go watch the whole secondary. It wasn't just Witherspoon. Brown, Martin, they're all good. So, just because they're not big names or they don't play big name positions doesn't mean they can't impact the football team positively going forward. That's what Ron and Martin are gambling on with these two guys right now up at the top of the draft.
It sounds good, Pete. And that just tells me that we're going to have you on mid-season or even next year to see how all this gumbo that we have, did it actually meld in the pot? You know what I mean?
Hey, man, look, the general manager, Pete, is ready to come back at any time and reevaluate my draft opinions. I don't hide. Look, just like last year, as giddy as I was about how Tyler Algier played for Atlanta, I ate crow on Carson Strong because I thought Carson Strong was going to turn out to be a productive NFL player. But, probably not going to happen for him. But clearly Tyler Algier did, and now he's going to be sharing a backfield with Bijan Robinson in Atlanta. Look out. Arthur Smith wants to run the ball. Now he's got 2 A-level running backs to run the football with down there in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Well, Pete, we've taken up way too much of your time, but Rally and I really appreciate you joining us. Is there anything we can help you pub for our listeners while you're on here?
Oh, no, I'm just Joe and I do the It's College Football podcast. Download it wherever you get your podcast. Easily able to find. If you want a complete rundown of the first round and our opinions on that, you can follow us there. And obviously, you can just follow me on Twitter at Pete Medhurst. Any questions you all have, I always answer them. I am not a Twitter snob.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Pete. And those of our listeners out there, make sure you give Pete a follow. Thank you for taking the time. The man is on his way to go cover a lacrosse game, do play-by-play. Like I said, he's one of the hardest working people out there. So, Pete, we definitely got to have you on sometime soon.
Glad to do it at any time, Ted. Appreciate you.
All right. You too, Pete. Take care.
Be safe, Pete. Take care.
Really appreciate Pete Medhurst jumping on. Once again, if you guys get a chance, make sure to follow Pete on Twitter. You can find him, Pete on Sports, or it's at Pete Medhurst. Give him a like, give him a follow, tell him you heard the interview. Make sure he hears the feedback. So we're trying to get more people on the show. You know, Rally's got the scratchy voice right now, so trying to give him a little bit of a break. But wanted to jump back into Jason Wright's interview with CNBC. And, you know, like we were saying earlier before Pete joined, this thing's happening. Well, the guy from CNBC obviously isn't as dialed into the sale like you are and all of our listeners are, but this is actually what Jason had to say about it.
Joining us now is the Washington Commanders president, Jason Wright. Jason, is a deal going through?
Well, it's not helpful for us to talk about it to make sure that it does end, but it does look like all things are coming to fruition. So we should all just wait and see.
So we should all just wait and see. But the good news is, I mean, our last show was on the 26th. AJ Perez actually had an article come out on the 27th. And in that article, he was talking about how, you know, this has already gone to the NFL. It hasn't officially gone from Bank of America and Snyder's camp, but the NFL has a copy of the bid. And they were lining stuff on it, crossing stuff off. Well, on May 10th, they are anticipating the finance committee is going to meet, and the Josh Harris group is supposed to be there giving a presentation at that meeting on May 10th. For those wondering, it's May 2nd. So we're literally talking 8 days from now. Josh Harris is going to be giving a PowerPoint or whatever he's going to do to the NFL Finance Committee. And then they're saying that they're potentially going to be able to have a vote later on. And the thing that I thought was interesting was what Roger Goodell actually had to say. So Goodell, on pre-draft coverage with ESPN, said, and here's a quote, "Progress is being made, and hopefully that progress will lead to them being comfortable to announce some type of a transaction probably by the middle of May or late May." Dude, it's May right now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
albeit it doesn't feel like May, but it's May right now.
Not at all. Definitely not. But just goosebumps, man. I mean, middle of May or late May. And we had AJ on, and AJ talked about how, you know, it took 2 months for the Broncos deal to happen. But I think everybody, including all the other NFL owners that Dan Snyder allegedly had dirt on and had secret files against them. It's like, you're a Marvel fan, right?
Yeah.
It's like, to me, Dan is like a short, tiny Nick Fury without the eye patch, where he had folders on all the Avengers.
On everybody, yeah.
You know, how to take them down and all this other stuff. Well, Dan has his little tiny folders that he said he was going to have on all the other owners, allegedly, to, you know, go after him if they came after him. Everyone just wants to get rid of this guy. And it seems like they might be fast tracking this to the point of that'll be done. And the next question that I have is, what are we going to do about a stadium? Because you just mentioned it, you know, we used to have the draft parties at the stadium. Well, we were at the freaking National Harbor instead. This is what Jason had to say about the new stadium location.
I took off out of Dulles.
Yeah.
And I looked down. Well, I looked that way to the right, and there was your stadium.
Yeah.
Is that going to be your home 10 years from now, or is there a new stadium possibly in the works?
Remains to be seen. I mean, one of the great opportunities we have with whomever's leading the organization in a few months here is the opportunity to lead a 30-year economic development project. And that's really what we see it. We're stewards of something that the leaders in the area will do that's going to raise economic outcomes, that's going to create employment opportunities, it's going to have broad-based social impact across the area. And so we have a unique opportunity to do that. It could be D.C., it could be Maryland, it could be Virginia. All have great leaders and great vision, and we'll be privileged to just be stewards of that vision with them.
So,
didn't really get much out of them.
Well, the question that I have, and it's strictly on a geography aspect of things. He said he took off from Dulles and looked down. He's talking about the bubble, correct?
I'm guessing he was talking about the Ashburn bubble out there. Yeah, unless, because by the time you're leaving a plane from Dulles, you're up how many thousand feet to be able to see FedEx Field. So,
Yeah.
and
Or even
I don't think
RFK.
there's yeah.
I mean,
It's
so you wouldn't even know what you were looking at. So, okay, it's got to be Dulles. Ashburn. So we can move on. But when it comes down to geography and stuff like that, I just say, wait a minute, that's not right.
yeah, no, I don't think it was right. But the good news is, all options are back on the table with new ownership. And, you and I have talked, we've talked to a lot of our listeners. Do we think it's going to happen at RFK? Where's it going to be? Everyone has their preference, but no one knows. And we'll just have to wait and see. It's like, we're going to get a new stadium. They can't stay at FedEx Field forever. The thing is literally falling apart. So where's it going to go? What's going to happen? But something that I also feel is, somewhat inevitable is the status of Ron Rivera. And I was kind of shocked when the CNBC guy, and I was trying to find out what his name was. So if someone knows, shoot me a tweet, let me know. But when the CNBC guy actually asked this question, I think I was surprised, and I think Jason was surprised. Wait till you hear it.
Thank you. Is Ron Rivera on a short leash for the upcoming season?
Come on,
and how
man.
much?
Come on, keep going.
What? I didn't even get to finish
keep going.
Especially when compared to the quick turnarounds exhibited by NFC East rivals with coaches that arrived at the same or later time. Ed, you're being a little bit pushy there, but I get it.
I got a lot of faith in Ron. Ron, for the first time, is going to be able to lead a football team without some of the external noise that we've experienced over time. And he would never make that as an excuse. He would never allow that to get into the guys' heads. But I'm curious to see how they perform without some of that in the background. And we've built a roster that's pretty strong. I think you could argue that the only place that we've underperformed over the last few years is at the quarterback position, and they have a lot of belief.
You confident in Sam Howell?
And they have a lot of belief in Sam Howell.
Listen, Howell, I hate him. He decimated my Hokies while he was at UNC.
Right. And I mean,
he ate us alive.
And if the small sample size we got last year is any indicator of what he was able to do against a Cowboys team that had things to play for at the end of the year, he's going to be fantastic for us. And we've built a roster around him that gives him weapons and a hell of a defense, especially after this last draft, a defense that is world-class on the front line, now world-class in the defensive backfield. I think it's going to be an interesting year.
I think it's going to be an interesting year, too, because I don't know if I agree with Jason's take, but what can you expect him to say to this guy? Is it just me, or do you think he was caught off guard by Homeboy's question?
Well, I think that he was caught off guard, but at the same time, you see what he said. No. Go ahead, give it to me. So because right now he doesn't want to have to answer questions like that, but he kept it politically correct enough to where it threw the scent off of the question and moved on to something else. He can't say, excuse me, he can't say, oh, I know Ron isn't going to be here next year. He just can't do that. So he's got to play it right down the middle. One thing that I like about Jason is I feel as though he's going to shoot you straight as much as he possibly can within the confines of what he can answer. Yeah. And I feel as though, like he said, Sam Howell, we right now, based upon the short piece that we saw, he did okay. So if he did okay, we're going to roll with him. And if not, we've got some guys in the wings who are ready to step up to the plate.
So were you shocked that we didn't take a quarterback in any of the rounds of the draft, especially considering, Will Levis dropped, you had a bunch of other guys drop? Were you surprised, or, being local here, we obviously talk about this all the time, in Sam we trust?
So I got to tell you that a part of me was a little shocked, but then my rational side comes back home and says, we got other things that we need. And so I was happy that we were able to fill holes, because I think that Sam is going to turn out to be a Purdy, providing he has the tools in front of him, meaning offensive line, to be able to give him those split seconds to make his mind up. And the thing that I like about Sam, is he's fast. He knows how to read blocks. He knows how to set blocks up. We saw it if you followed him in his college career, and you saw a huge sample size of it against the Dallas Cowboys last year. So he's got what it takes, but does the team have what it takes to get him through it? And so getting back to your original question, I was, but I wasn't, because I knew we needed more pieces.
Yeah, and we only had 7 picks in the draft, and I don't feel
Right.
that Rivera had the luxury of being able to draft someone. And thank God I didn't want him to draft a project quarterback, but I was surprised. So today on Kevin Sheehan's show on the Team 980, he had Mike Jones on. Mike Jones is a writer for The Athletic. And Mike actually said that Washington was interested in moving up to the Raiders' 7 spot to potentially take Anthony Richardson. But Richardson went 4 to Indy, so that fell apart. I am just lighting a candle and praying and thanking whoever's out there that did not happen, because I feel that would have been just catastrophic to mortgage and give up a bunch of picks to get Richardson when we still don't even know what we have with Howe. And let's really find out what the young man can do and give him a shot. And if it doesn't work with Sam, then we just get a brand new coaching staff to come in here. And he was just a 5th round pick that, can maybe prove himself to be a backup for the new guy, but let the new guy pick and choose who he wants as his QB1.
And we have seen it throughout the years. When new owners come in, they pick who they want. Coaches, the whole 9 yards. So it's time to just stand by, hold your horses, and let's let this thing play out. No one's giving us a chance. I was reading somewhere where we're in the bottom of the barrel as far as the NFC East is concerned, as far as picks. So no one's giving us a chance. And I think it's time for us to show up and really show what we can truly do.
Yeah. In regards to picks, this was actually a clip of Rivera and Martin Mayhew post-draft. So we like to call ourselves Cliff Notes for Commanders fans. I've got a couple of clips coming up here of their post-draft press conferences. And here's Marty and Ron talking about their overall just idea of how they were tackling the draft.
Just overall, kind of what was the priority going into this draft class, and how do you just generally feel about the group of guys that you got?
Well, I think, the priority kind of showed itself a little bit where you saw we went with the 2 defensive backs and then the 2 offensive linemen, and pretty much just kind of sticking to that. That was one of the things that we wanted to continue with in terms of the depth. At cornerback, I think we filled a need that we were looking for a playmaker, and I think Emmanuel does that for us. With Jartavius, with Kwan, we got a guy that has the ability to come in and play Buffalo nickel as well as free safety, and again adds some more depth too. On the offensive line, getting Ricky Stromberg, and then following that up today with Brandon, that was good for us. Again, we continue to add some more depth and guys that have played a lot of football, and hopefully that'll transition into them, being the kind of pros that we hope for. And then we finished off with, some guys that we felt that would add some more depth to some of the positions we're looking at.
Do you feel like you filled the biggest needs you had going into this offseason through free agency and now through this draft?
I think we filled a lot of needs in free agency, and today I think we keep looking. We keep trying to get better. The draft is not a finish line. We're not done. It's April. It's a lot of time before the season starts, and we're going to keep trying to make our roster better.
And I don't think they filled their biggest needs. I mean, you take 2 corners with your first 2 picks, and you take 2 interior linemen with your 3rd and your 4th pick. And in my opinion, offensive line is the biggest deficiency we have on this team. Offensive tackle specifically, because odds are Sam Cosmi is moving inside to right guard. Well, who's going to play right tackle? And Charles Leno, I'm sorry, no offense to Charles, but it's not like he's been all pro. They could definitely improve at that position. So I'm frustrated and upset with the draft because I don't feel that they addressed some other needs, and they didn't bring any free agent tackles in. They brought in Nick Gates. They brought in another guard. So I still think we've got holes there, and we're hoping, and again, hope's not a strategy, that the guys that we still have are going to give Sam that time that you just so eloquently talked about a minute ago. And I don't know, man. I'm not sure if that's how it's going to go.
Well, one thing Martin did say is that it's not the finish line. This is just April / we're into May now, but we can see the finish line. How about that?
Yeah, we can. And there's going to be some players cut. There's going to be some players cut post June 1 so they can save salary cap. And a lot of talk is Chase Roullier going to get cut? If they cut Chase Roullier now, pre June 1, I believe he's an $8 million cap hit. If they cut him after June 1, he's a $4 million cap hit. So there's reasons why I think they're waiting, because they're trying to free up space, and they're trying to also see who gets let go by some other teams out there. And I hope that we're not going into the actual season with this potential offensive line as it's constructed now, because I still think we've got holes to fill. But one hole that the team thinks they filled, and we talked to Pete about this earlier, is Emmanuel Forbes. Well, this is when Ron and Marty said they knew that Emmanuel was their guy.
When was the moment that you knew this was going to be your guy?
We get close to our pick, and then we get a few names together of guys to consider. And as we talked it through, he was the one that we had consensus on. We felt great about.
That was probably the best part about it was the consensus, because we sit down and we talk with Eric and we talk with Jack, and then we get together as a group and talk about him, and he was in that stack, and as we started to see players moving in front of us, players moving behind us, the thing that we really liked was he was still there, and that's why we jumped on it.
So a lot of people had Forbes going later than the Commanders picked him. His draft projection was rounds 1 and 2. And on the Beltway Football Pod, a podcast that JP Finley, Pete, and Mitch do, they actually had a guy on there talking about Emmanuel, saying they think he's going to be a second-round pick versus a first. Well, the Commanders don't like to shift. Ron, this is year 4 of them drafting. They have their draft board, and if people fall, I feel that they're just so laser focused on their board, they don't really call audibles. And that's just my opinion. But after sitting with Fred at the draft party and drinking way too much hanging out with him, I mean, I'm an Emmanuel Forbes believer, but I was worried, man, when you saw his stats come up that he was 166 pounds at corner, and you saw the highlights. I mean, the guy's a stick figure. What were you thinking?
Well, I honestly thought that he kind of reminded me of the People's Corner, Jimmy Moreland. I mean, no one gave that guy a chance, and he's still in the league. And if I'm not mistaken, he plays with the Jets now. So even though his tenure didn't last here, but he still moved on to another team. And I think he's starting, excuse me, I think he's starting for the Jets. So, and you also got to look at, okay, yeah, he's a little small, but when it comes down to it, what's his body at work in college? What's it like? Did he have an issue tackling people? Did he have an issue with the fundamentals of wrapping up, going shoulder square? Did he have a problem with those things? No, he didn't. So a lot of times we like to add all this stuff to where the kid didn't have a problem before. So let's not add any more to something that's not there.
Yeah. And he's 6 foot, 166 pounds. So I hear your comparison to Jimmy. The thing is, taking someone with the 16th overall pick in the draft of that size, it would lead you if you don't know anything about him, to be concerned. But he played 3 years in the SEC, didn't miss a single game to injury. That to me is key.
It's huge.
He was a ball hawk. The guy knows and has a knack for the ball and just a knack for football in general. And he actually owns a bunch of different records. So this was a tweet that JP Funny put out there. Emmanuel owns the FBS career record with 6 pick sixes. He's the FBS active career lead in overall defensive touchdowns with 6. He broke the FBS record shared by 3 other players, most recently by Oklahoma State's Darren Williams. He has 6 interceptions this year and 14 total picks in his career, a total that also makes him the active career interceptions leader in the FBS. He leads the nation since his career began 2020 and is now 4th in MSU history. Forbes is also 4th among active FBS players in career interception return yards at 390. He set MSU's single season record for interception return yards in 2020 at 183 with 5 picks, besting Jonathan Banks. And he set the MSU and Armed Forces Bowl record with a 90-yard interception return for a touchdown. And I was talking to B. Mitch, the draft, and he was saying Forbes played wide receiver. So that gives him kind of a leg up on other guys because he knows how routes are run. And that's that anticipation that has allowed him to take advantage of quarterbacks and wide receivers and have him be such a ball hawk.
Well, the other thing you got to look at, Ted, is this. He's played football at this size for the amount of years that he's played. He knows how to put his body on the line to where it won't get hurt. I mean, this isn't, now granted, the NFL is different than college, but the SEC is close to the pros as you can get. And he was making tackles then. So he knows how to tackle. He knows what his body is capable of. And I think that the same way that he tackled in the SEC in college, he will transform that into the big leagues, and he will do the exact same thing. And
Yeah,
the thing is, he doesn't have to try to kill you. He just got to get you down.
Yeah. And his job is to stop you from getting the ball, not tackle you when you get the ball. So there's a lot to it, but this is actually a clip of Ron and Marty talking about Forbes' size and if they had any questions regarding it.
Emmanuel's only 166 pounds. Was there any concern there with his size? Do you want him to come in bigger?
Well, I mean, if he puts on good weight, absolutely. You know, that I think will happen as he continues to mature. I think he's a young man who, you know, we got to understand he's still growing. And again, he played in the SEC and did what he did. Is there a concern? No. I don't have a concern just from watching his tape and watching who he played against.
When you watch his tape, you don't know that he's that light. He doesn't look like that on tape. He doesn't play like that. He's been durable. Had missed a game because of an injury in 3 years, 3-year starter. So he's been durable in the SEC and he's played a lot of football. So that's something that we don't really concern ourselves with.
And like I said earlier, if Doc Walker's not concerned, talking to B. Mitch, he's not concerned. Fred's biased, so I'm taking his opinion out of it. But talking to these Hall of Famers, these legends, these guys that played the game, these guys that won Super Bowls for us, if they are not concerned, and if anyone knows B and Doc, they tell the truth. They don't sugarcoat anything. They keep it real. They have no concerns about Emmanuel Forbes. I don't think you, me, or any of our listeners should either. I think this young man is going to be a star here. And let's just grab some popcorn and sit back and enjoy.
Yeah, man. The only concern I got is, God dang, it's taking too long to see him on the field.
It is going to take some time. And I think he's going to rock number 13. And the last, I think, Washington player that did that was Anthony Armstrong. So I'm hoping he lasts here a little bit longer than Anthony. But one concern I do have was, you know, the fact that Martin Mayhew said this during the draft.
Martin, you were pretty open pre-draft about your appreciation for trading down. Did any calls come your way when you were there at 16?
No, we didn't get any calls this year. We got a ton last year, but we didn't get them this year. We discussed that and looked at it. There were a number of guys that we liked. We felt there was a certain distance we could go back and still get one of those guys, but the call didn't come, and we made the call to get Emmanuel.
So I get the call not coming and you actually not getting a chance to trade back, because a lot of fans were frustrated, but thank goodness Martin came out and said, no one called us. No one wanted to trade. So we just took our guy. Well, this is Mayhew talking about being aggressive or not so much.
Martin, why do you wish that you were a little more aggressive at times with trades, and what situations stand out to you?
Yeah, we talked to teams throughout the process. We did a lot of talking about trades over the last couple of days. There were several that we almost made today, and we didn't. They didn't come together for various reasons. And sometimes you call, a team has a guy already lined up, or they've got a trade already lined up. So you just start calling, trying to make it happen. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So it's a very fluid process. And we just missed out on a couple. I'm really happy with the guys that we ended up getting, though. And a lot of times, the trade you didn't make is the one you're glad you didn't make. We end up getting one of these guys that ends up, being a real difference maker for us. We'd be glad that we have him. Do you wish you went up or down or both? A little bit of both. A little bit of both. There were some both ways. Like I said, I'm on the phone, as Coach can tell you. Mm-hmm. I'm on the phone. I'm talking. I'm texting. I'm calling people throughout. Sometimes we're trying to go up. Sometimes we're open to moving back or trying to move back.
Were you concerned that Mayhew was not as aggressive as he wished he was, and the fact that he came out publicly to say something about it?
I think at that point in time, I can appreciate the man's honesty. I think at that point in time, you stay status quo and say, no, I'm happy with what we have. Because now it makes you look kind of, I'm not going to say weak, but it just makes you look like, okay, are you really supposed to be in that position type of thing? So, I wish maybe he just would have kept it just status quo the way that Belichick does.
I'm right there with you, because if I'm one of these 7 players that he drafted, then I'm thinking to myself, were you trying to trade back and not get me? Were you trying to trade up and get somebody else? So it puts doubt out there in front of everybody. And Mayhew typically doesn't say things like this. And I guess they might have caught him late after the draft, after being up for 3 days in a little vulnerable position. But man, Martin, all of this is an interview for the new people. That's a tick in the wrong column for you right there, man.
Yeah. Joe, buddy, I hear the drum line. That lets me know that that's bringing another edition of the DMV Mess Hall to a close. We appreciate Pete Medhurst for coming on. Awesome guy. Don't forget to follow him on Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe, like our show as well, the DMV Mess Hall. We can't do it without you guys. And, well, I guess we could, but why would we? We want you guys and we need you guys. So, Ted, thank you, my brother, for another great show. And remember, rep it hard or don't rep it at all. Tailgate Ted, Rally Captain, and we'll be out.